Hey guys, welcome to this new tutorial on Unity. So I'm gonna continue with the series of the past few tutorials, but in this one I'm gonna just take a little bit of time to look at animations, and basically what we're gonna try to do is create an animation, a simple animation really, see how the animation framework of Unity works in relation to script as well, and how can we actually trigger an animation from a script, right? So let's get started. So I'm gonna start, I have this kind of scene and I'm gonna create a new game object that is gonna be a cube. Let's zoom into that guy. Oops. So maybe we just want to put it in 0, 0, 0 and then just lift it up. There we go, and we are gonna just scale it down a little bit like that. Right, so it's a plane, something like a plane. And what we're gonna do to this guy, I'm gonna create an animation, right? So we could actually, I already have created a tab called animations, but you could just basically anywhere here, right click, create animation, right? So this is gonna allow us to create a clip. So I'm gonna call this clip 1, right? And this clip will allow us to store information of transformations or like all sorts of rotations and things like that into our object, right? So I'm gonna just drag this animation and drag it to this object. So you'll see that there's this kind of animation component added to the object now, and it has the clip inside it, right? So if I remove that for a second, basically what we just did by dragging that clip into the object, it's that we basically added here in miscellaneous an animation component to the object and then dragging that into the animation, right? So the clip to be played is gonna be clip 1. Right, the same thing, you end up with the same result. If you want to do more steps, you can just go that way. And let's look at this tab a little bit. So it's saying, well, play automatically, that's on. That's good. Well, we'll see a few variations of that. And the clip that is playing, it's the clip 1. The clip 1 right now doesn't have any information. So if we press play, nothing's gonna happen. It's not gonna start animating us, you know, like nothing's really happening, right? So we need to basically store some sort of information inside that animation clip, right? So for that we can go into Window, Animation tab, or Control-6, right? So let's do that, Control-6, and there we go. So we have this object, which is a cube, and we have an Animation tab. So you could see here that it's saying cube, and it has one clip, right? So we could just, if we had more than one clip, we could actually select a second clip. But so that's very straightforward. We have the object, and here in the timeline, you see this is in seconds. We can actually create all sorts of animation. So let's do something simple like rotation, right? So let's start by pressing the record button, and you'll see that when I press record, the play button of the game doesn't allow me to just play the game. I'm in recording mode, so in this point in time I can only change things in the cube. So I'm gonna just do a change here, let's say rotation in Z 0. That's fine. If I'm just gonna click 0 and enter, and it's gonna automatically create a keyframe for me, and then I can drag this timeline here to 1 and then say here in Z 90. Right, so very straightforward. I mean, make sure you're not moving this little icon here, because this represents the keyframe itself. The keyframe is the node in which the information is stored. So I can actually play back and forth now by dragging this, and you see that if I press play, it's going to show me that animation. Once it gets to the end, it's going to start over, right? Very simple. So I'm going to leave this open here, and if I press play now, you see that my animation should play once and remain, stay like that, right? Okay, so Let's look at some of the options that we have, right? So for instance, if we click on the clip here, clip 1, it will show you some of the options of the clip. The clip 1 by default, it's in default mode, but it has a different ways of playing, right? You have once, which is going to be just play once, or play a loop, right? Or play ping pong. Loop means that it's going to repeat over and over the animation. Ping pong is that's going to go back and forward, and so on. So let's look at loop, and if we select the object now, you'll see that the timeline of this animation is showing me the changes that this will have, right? Like it's going to show me like it goes from 0 to 90, and then from 0 to 90, and that forever, right? So that's pretty useful, because we could actually use that kind of diagram to say, well, what if we want to have a loop that it doesn't kind of jump, but it just continues, right? So we could go into record mode again, move into our keyframes. We could also navigate between keyframes with these two, right? And at this point, maybe you don't want to put 90, but you want to put 180, right? So let's look at what happens there. You see that once it gets to the other side, I mean, you cannot see that it's different because my geometry is actually symmetrical in that direction, right? But it looks like it's completely rotating, right? I could also say, well, can you rotate in 360? Maybe that won't work. Let's see. And in that way, we're actually getting a full circle and then looping through that, right? So this should actually get updated. We get to 360, which is 0, and then we start over, right? But let's go back to the idea of 90, right? So with 90, we have that jump, right? But let's try to change the wrap mode of the clip to ping pong and see what ping pong means. Ping pong means that we just get to the end of the animation and then we go backwards and then forward and so on. So we could see it. Well, this is going to just show me the animation. So if we press play, we could actually see the ping pong, and you see it's pretty harsh, the movement, so we can actually get in the curve and edit a little bit this animation, right? So let's go and press record again, and I'm gonna just move to the frame, to this frame, and I'm gonna click on 0 again, and you see that I'm creating a keyframe that is exactly the same as the first one, 0 0, and then the interpolation of this kind of the transition between these two keyframes is gonna have some properties to it, so we're gonna have to edit that, right? And then I'm gonna just go, I'm gonna go to here, and I'm gonna press 90, and again the properties of this curve we would like to just change, right? So what I can do is just select, right click, and I could say flat. Let's see, there we go, flat, right? So this is actually making that the curves transition from the movement to that point is just flat, and you see how the curves is actually getting now very smooth, and this is kind of a nice way of just getting a behavior like this one to work, right? Because you'll see that now if we look at the we play the animation, we have stay, then kind of increase, accelerate, and then decelerate to reach the other side, right? So that's pretty good, and that's our clip. I mean, we could just basically play with this, the amount of time that we have spending here or down here. You know, we can just play, move those keyframes around, and basically, obviously, we could just like expand this animation to be longer and so on. But I'm going to show you how to kind of, let's say, a few things, how to. Just going to make sure that we are not messing up our animation. Okay, there we go. So let's try to do the following. Let's try to if we raycast over this object from our kind of first-person controller, right? So we're here. If we raycast on that object, maybe we want to just call the animation, right? So that's something that we could just start doing by, let's say, don't play the animation automatically, and once we click on it, we play the animation, right? So how do we do that? Let's go into our script, and then you see that we do have a create cubes, raycast. Right, so in this part of the script, our raycast function is checking for objects with the tag cube, and this, please refer to some of the previous tutorials to kind of see how we were doing this. Like, we started from scratch the script, so I'm gonna just be using this. So I'm gonna say if the tag of the object is something like animation cube, I'm gonna have to create that tag. Let's do something, right? And we're gonna see how to play that animation. So first, let's make sure that we have that tag. We probably don't have it, so we're gonna create it. So animation cube. So that's good. And then make sure that you select it again and apply that tag to the object, right? So does it match? Yes, animation cube, right? So if we hit that object with the raycast, let's print something like yes, right? So let's make sure that that's working first, and this is just a good practice to make sure that. So I'm gonna click on it, and I kind of saw it there, but we're actually getting this printout from the last script that we can just remove, which is here, print the number of cubes in the array. So let's make sure we don't have that on. It's kind of interfering with the printout. So click, and you see yes, we are kind of raycasting over it, right? So okay, that's good. So we could actually, if we search into the documentation and we look for animation, and go into animation, we could say play, right? So function play, simple one here, animation.play, right? So let's try that one. So instead of printing yes, let's comment that out. We could say hit.transform.gameObject.animation.play, right? So let's see if that would work. So we're gonna call the animation component inside the object, and then call like to play the animation. And you see that we triggered the animation to start happening once we click, right? The case is that we are using the ping pong, so once we turn it on, basically it stays on forever, right? So we're gonna click on once, right? So this time we could actually go here and click on it, and then click again. So every time we click, we activate an animation. And in this case, you would have to just make sure that your animation is actually looping, right? So it's going back and forth if that's what you want, right? In this case, actually, it would be nicer to have the animation here. To get to something like 360. And then here again 360. Let's see. So yeah, a 360 rotation would be better here, as it's gonna do a full twist, right? So you want to do just half a twist, you could do 180, which seems to be the most appropriate as well, really. So let's just make it right, okay? So let's do 180, and then the next one 180 as well. Cool. So we have that. But then I thought, well, I want to have more control over the animation. I want to just be able to kind of, let's say, what if I was able to control the animation by some sort of script variable. I thought, well, what if I could control this, the timeline of the script with something like a Perlin Noise, for instance. If you don't know what Perlin Noise is, just you could Google it. There's a lot of information about that online. So I'm actually going to take the time to create a script that I already wrote, and it kind of works quite nicely. What we need to understand is that we are calling the animation clip from the outside the object, right? So we are kind of saying, okay, start playing. What I will need here is just to create in my scripts, I'm going to create a script called animation control. And I think I already had one called animation control, so I could just call, yeah, animation control 1. And I'm going to drag this guy inside my object, right? So my animation control object, I could edit the script. Let's go into that. And basically what I want to be able to do is just, I was looking into the documentation, right? And there's something called, the animation, right, has a lot of functionalities to kind of really start changing the animation and playing it and so on. But something that I was interested in is the animation state, right? The animation state seems to be a series of functions. It gives like a detail control over the animation, right? So there's things here that are kind of really useful, right? Like speed, right? So we're gonna just do this, and we're gonna call it from inside the object. So let's try one, like animation, and what is the name of the clip? It's called clip 1, I think, right? So we have to use that name. So clip 1, and we're gonna say speed 0.5 or 0.12, right? So let's see, when I basically click on the object, now this animation control, or this animation state, is saying that the speed of the animation is going to be 0.2. So let's click on that, and did anything happen? Apparently not. There we go. And you see that we're triggering the animation, but it's much slower, right? So we have the chance to control the speed of that animation and basically use any script to like have a simple animation but then play it very slowly or very fast and control that. If you look into the documentation, you have like lots of other things to control. Let's say, is it enabled, is it not enabled, and so on, things like that. And the speed, it's a good one. The time, very strong variable to check, because it would allow you to kind of really kind of move back and forth, define the time of the animation as you go along. And the one that I was more interested in is like the normalized time, right? So if we look at it, it's going to use a value between 0 and 1 to determine whatever the length of the animation is, right? So I thought that was pretty useful. So let's try to use the following. So we're going to use animation. So our clip, it's called clip 1. Let's remove that for a second. Normalized time. And if we put 0.5, that would be like halfway through the animation, right? And I'm going to just make sure that our object has play automatically on, right? In that way, it's going to be playing all the time, and but our script is going to be overriding its time. It's going to be saying all the time, just your time is going to be 0.5. So we can actually go to the point 0.5 in that animation, right? Which is halfway through the other side, right? So let's make sure we could change this. We could try something like random dot range between 0, and 1, right? And that should give us a value. It's a random value every frame. and it would just jitter, right? And it's not working. Okay, this seems to be not working as we wanted, so let's try something else. Let's try that idea of Perlin Noise that I was mentioning. So math dot Perlin Noise, and Perlin Noise, we have to provide an x coordinate, so I could say something like 10, 10, and then I'm gonna say plus time dot time, right? And what this should give me, it's a value that it's always between 0 and 1, but it's kind of changing through a kind of a noise field or a Perlin noise field, right? So let's see if this, I'm gonna put this time, the time in parentheses, because I want to be able to scale down the speed of that. So you see that I'm getting this kind of behavior that it's now it's playing back and forth the animation, but it's using the Perlin noise as a reference, right? Cool. So let's look at what Perlin noise is actually doing. So Perlin noise here is showing us that it's a function that creates a 2D map. So when you give the coordinates, let's say 10 and 10, it's going to sample what would be the color, either black 0 or white 1 within this field, right? So what you want to do is just keep on moving the field, saying that I'm moving basically in that field. That's why we're using time. So time is saying I'm in X, I'm in 0 or in 10, right? I start in 10 and then I start moving in X, or in X would be this direction. I keep on moving, and the noise field changes constantly, right? So that's what we're saying. So that's pretty useful to basically have a alternating value that it's random, right? So let's see what happens if I create 2 of these guys. I put them side by side. You see, the Perlin noise is actually giving them the same values, right? It's just scrubbing through the animation. So if you imagine the animation going back and forth with the Perlin noise, that's working well. But the problem is that I want these guys to just follow the field, right? So this 10 here represents the coordinate. So basically I want to just be able to say something. Let's create a variable called position from the kind vector3. And I could say something like transform dot position. So in this way, game object dot transform dot position. In this way, position is going to be based on whatever the game object is, wherever it's located. So I will try to put position.x here and position.y here. So let's see if we're getting anything different out of this or any errors. And now both of them are somehow in a different place in the field, right? So what I'm gonna do now is just maybe copy these guys many times, because I want to try to see that field, and I'm gonna try to see this effect as a field effect now. So bear with me a little bit while I copy some of these guys around. I mean, we could do them with a script where they're already kind of positioned in the right place and so on, but that would take some time as well. So let's just try to copy them quickly. I think that should be almost enough. Do one more, and let's see what we get. So we have a bunch of guys here doing the same effect. And you see that we're having this kind of feel that it's kind of just passing by, right? So let's just do some changes to our script. This time I'm gonna put time also in the Y, so it's also navigating the Y, but I want to just be able to use a scale factor. So in this case, scale time 1 is going to be times 0.5, and in this other side it's going to be times 0.2, right? And the position, we might want to scale this down or up depending on the scale of the field. So it's also something that we could just say maybe divided by, what I usually do is check. Let's say this is gonna be, what is the biggest value of the, so 12, 16, okay, let's say divided by 15, right? So divided by 15, positioning Y divided by 15, right? So let's see what we get now. So we are getting this kind of field effect where the kind of information of the animation is being kind of moved back and forth, but it doesn't seem to be kind of doing it in the other direction. Let's check what's going on. So we have position. So maybe time here could be faster, right? And let's use this number to be smaller. Let's try that. And here you can just basically play and start seeing what works and what doesn't. I'm gonna have to try to find some better values here. Right, so sorry, I should have used position.set here. And let's try that with 10. Maybe this should work better. So position.set. There we go. So that's a bit nicer, right? So you can actually start seeing now then the field of basically the Perlin Noise field, right? And we're basically, what we could have done this easily with rotation. Just say rotate, and the amount of that you're rotating, it's just it's based on the Perlin Noise. But I thought that was pretty interesting to look at how you can create an animation of any character or anything really, and then control, let's say, a grid or a series of them based on a Perlin Noise as well, because that really starts creating some sort of field effect, and you can just look at that. If we look at the parameters here while this is playing, the size of the pattern, it's defined by this number. So if you make this number somehow bigger, the pattern should become smaller, right? So if you do 20, we should get a more, let's see. Or the other way around, maybe. So 5. somehow I feel it looks better when we have it bigger somehow, right? And so that's determining the size of the pattern, those two numbers. And then the speed of the pattern, the speed of movement, it's determined by these two, right? So it's moving in x in certain amount, so you could say, well, 2.0 here, that would make it move much faster in the opposite direction. And you could see the pattern moving much faster, right? So time is determining the speed, and x is determining the scale of it. So yeah, this is going to be the end of this one. I think it's going to be quite a good one, in the sense that we looked at the basics of animations and then how to control the animations with a kind of with a script determining the, like a Perlin noise field. And yeah, that's it. I hope you liked it.